Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 401, Animal Games.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go to their website, check out their amazing product. I know we say that each and every week that it's amazing product, but it really is. Their toppers are amazing. The mats are so well done. The accessories, you can get legs to put your toppers on. You can get leaves to cover your topper to actually use it as a table. You could make your game table a dining table. Just so much goodness that can be found at their website. So go check them out. That's GameToppersLLC.com.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holliday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday, and this week we have a special guest with us.
I'm James Clark, and this week we'll be talking about games that have animals.
We are discussing all sorts of animal games. So, James, years ago, your wife, Kim, and me and my wife, Cheryl, would often get together and play a game that I don't want to say loathe, but I don't really care for much at all. And that's a game called Killer Bunnies. It's not necessarily a deck building game. You're drawing some cards and you're creating a tableau in front of you, and you have a bunny and you're trying to augment that bunny to collect carrots. And there are 20 carrots that are available. Once all the carrots are collected, you flip over the magic carrot stack until the last card is revealed, and whomever is the owner of that card,
if they have a bunny,
is the winner of the game. This game is loads of frustrations. On your turn, if you ever have no bunnies in front of you, you lose stuff. All you're going to do is you draw a card. And is it a bunny? Nope. That was my turn. While everybody else is fully involved in their game, and all you're doing is just drawing a card, not a bunny. All right, next. At first, I found it entertaining. I enjoyed it. Plus, it got to the point where there were so many expansions. Content kind of overshadowed the quality of the game.
Yeah, we started playing it with no expansions, just the base, because we had so many expansions. The deck would get so tall, you couldn't ever get through all your cards anyway. And so you never really saw what they all did. It was just more fun to play the base anyway. Though after a while, you're right, it kind of got to where the whole thing was random as to who won. And if you didn't have a bunny, you're not winning. So
I think that was my biggest beef with the game, is the randomness of who won. You could have gotten by far the majority of the carrots and still lose the game.
If you only got one carrot, that was the only carrot.
I had a lot of fun with it.
We played it several times. Not a game I would ever consider bringing to the table.
It sits in the closet.
Mine's in an 800 count card box. The only time it sees the day is when I'm sorting games and I'm like, what is this? Oh, let's put that back on the shelf.
I should call it.
Yeah. Probably.
I don't know if you get anybody to buy it. Well, a lot of people love it. It's the same thing with Munchkin, right?
I was going to say, it is a very popular game still. There are a lot of people, I'm down with that same thing, right? With Munchkin, there are several games like that are just, I guess I want my gameplay to have some factor in whether or not I am going to win the game. The purpose in playing a lot of these games is I can put together some sort of strategy and see if I can figure out a way to make whatever I'm starting with work to end up pulling out a victory. That's just not a thing you can do with these.
It just got to the point where it was no fun. If you ever got stuck with that no bunny, that game just made you mad. It's everybody's playing and you're just flipping a card.
But there are lots of awesome animal games.
So now that we got that one out of the way, what do you have, Dave?
Looking at the list right here, the very first game is one of my favorites, Agricola, a game that I have loved for a long time. In fact, the very first that I played that was here at game night. I remember playing that game and my mind was blown with, right? I was just like, that game was so awesome. There was just so many different interesting things in there. These occupations that I could play that would give me certain powers, a bunch of minor improvements that I could build on my farm that would help me be more efficient, that would give me extra resources. There's just so many different directions you can go. So in Agricola, everybody has a farm. You have this board in front of you, 3x5 grid. You start with 2 rooms of a wooden hut and 2 family members. It's a worker placement game. You end up placing these family members out onto a central board that has a bunch of different spaces And each round, you add a new space to the board. Spaces like collect wood, collect clay, collect reed, fishing, or different ways of collecting building resources or food. Food is something at the end of several of the rounds you have to feed your family. For each food that you are short, you take a begging card, which is worth -3 points at the end of the game. Such variety in this game and so many different things that you can do. You can focus on collecting animals. You can focus on growing crops.
You kind of have to diversify.
Yes.
You get negative points if you don't have enough of kind of everything.
Right. You have to have generally one of each category in the final scoring. If you don't have at least one, you get a -1 point. I just think it's a very good game. There's a lot of different strategies that I can put together, a lot of different things that I can try to fiddle with and see if I can make work. And it's just cool. So I walked away from that very first time we played this. I think I rode out here with Dennis our entire way driving home. Man, that game was so awesome. That game was so cool. And Dennis thought the same thing. So he bought it. I don't know if he had. And we took it home and we played it with Richie. And that's actually one of Richie's favorite games now too. A good game all around.
One of the nice things about Agricola is it has family mode. So it simplifies the game. If I'm not mistaken, it takes the occupations out of it. Makes it so it's a little more accessible to people that aren't quite so into the heavier side of Agricola. But I also like how the game changes depending on player count. You get extra starting actions with more players. I think it plays quite differently, with the more players you have.
And the strategy changes. You're forced to look at different things. The action spaces on the board are completely different with each different number player count. Again, just with more variety in what you can try to do.
I like that everything is limited. You have a certain number of fences, so you can't just build your one giant pasture. You don't have enough fences to do that. Have to include fields, so you can plant your vegetables, you can plant your grain. All those will take up space on that grid, and you can build your house and increase your house size. It gives you more workers, but that gives you more mouths to feed. So you have to manage that food. Agricola is a great game. Dave and I have actually been playing it several times on BGA lately, Board Game Arena. I'm terrible at the game.
I'm just excited I finally figured out how to set it up with the occupation cards. And
so we're not playing the family style.
Yeah.
Which means I'm going to lose even more.
I don't know. I didn't get very good cards this time.
Funny thing is how much Dave likes this game. It actually kind of surprises me. Definitely one of those games where you feel like you need at least another 3 or 4 rounds.
Absolutely. You know what, though? When I fell in love with this game, I didn't feel that as much. For whatever reason, I was able to do much better for a long time. For the first lots of plays of this game, I didn't run into that.
I don't think your anxiety was as steeped then.
I don't think so either. I've wondered if that's part of it. I am more of a basket case now than I was when I fell in love with this game.
I thought you were going to say Tiny Towns when you said that it was one of your favorite games.
Oh. It's not an animal game.
It is an animal game, actually.
Wow. Well, why don't you talk about it then?
I will.
Challenge accepted.
So with Tiny Towns, I've had a ton of fun with this. The reason I bought this game is because my wife, one of the few video games that she'll play is Tetris. And it reminded me enough of Tetris because you have to plan your board out kind of like Tetris. So everyone has a starting city. It's just a grid. On your turn, you get to call out a resource. Everyone has to take that resource. You place that resource somewhere on that grid. Now, there's many different buildings, and in order to build that building, you have to have the correct resources in the correct shape on that grid. Once you have that built with those resources, you can take all those resources off, and then on one of those squares where you had a resource, you can place that building. And each of the buildings will do something different. Cottage is always in, and it's going to score you points if it's fed. You have a building that's going to feed your cottages. You have church-type buildings. You have market-type buildings. You have industrial buildings. These cards are put out randomly at the beginning of the game, so the game changes every time you play. There's 2 expansions out, which add cards and coins, so that as you gain coins, if someone calls out a resource that you don't want, you can spend a coin and take a different resource. Adds a little bit more flexibility in that way. Super fun game. A little challenging because there is a lot of planning ahead in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish. It can really screw you up if someone's calling out a resource and you really don't want that resource. You've got it all planned out perfectly,
right?
And you don't really have a spot for it. You have to basically scrub what you were going to do, replan everything out based on what you have on your board. And sometimes you end up with resources left over that you just can't do anything with.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has also a monument that is unique to them. You can build one of those is all. You build that monument, it unlocks whatever power, whether sometimes it's a power that you can use throughout the game that's asymmetrical, or it's just a lot of points. Village expansions adds villagers to the game, which allows you to adds villagers to your board as well. You can use those and spend those to activate villager cards that are in the center. Some of them can be pretty powerful cards. One I need to get Dave to play again. Last time we played, it was...
You broke Dave.
I actually kind of did break Dave.
We often talk about me breaking games. Yeah, I was broken during that game. I have played it once since then.
Oh, have you?
I survived it. I fear playing that game because I felt horrible. These guys always tease me, as you know, about taking a long time. I have some learning disabilities, issues, whatever, and they affect my visual perception quite a bit. The way that I was sitting, the game was not facing me, and it really affected my issues so bad that I was paralyzed.
Well, the funny thing is the shapes don't really matter, but they did for you because it shouldn't matter.
Right.
Because you can rotate the shapes, you can invert the shapes to build those houses.
Right.
And for some reason, it messed with your head.
It broke me completely. I was paralyzed the whole time. And so then every time it came around to my turn, I was about under the table crying because I knew how I was ruining the game for everybody else. And there's nothing I could do about it. I was paralyzed. It was horrible. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. The next time I played it, it wasn't nearly so bad, but I don't know if it was just leftover feelings from the first time, but
traumatized.
I think
Residual
PTSD.
effects.
Yeah, like seriously. It is a good game, though. I really do. I like the game. I'm scared of ever playing it.
So we're going off the grid. A great game that we just got at the first of this year was New York Zoo. It also has that similar Tetris feel. Have you played this one, Jay?
Yeah, I really like this game. Actually.
Yeah, this is super simple.
It's one I'm thinking about buying, maybe for Christmas.
Yeah.
For the wife.
Great pickup.
Now she knows.
Now she knows.
Surprise!
Surprise!
Now you better do it. You better follow through.
New York Zoo is you're moving the pawn around the zoo, and you have the chance to either add animals or enclosures to your grid. And your grid size changes depending on the player count. So you can either add animals to active enclosures that you have. If it's a brand new enclosure, you can add an animal to it. Otherwise, if you're going to add an animal to it, you have to add like animals to the same enclosures. If you ever fill an enclosure, then you remove all those animals. After you clear off an enclosure, you get to put one of those animals back into your animal houses that you can use later. And then you get to add an amusement park or an attraction to your zoo. And so the goal is to fill up your zoo and to monopolize on those enclosures that you have. Very easy game. My wife enjoyed it. It was the first game that I played 10 times this year. It was one that just boom, boom, boom. Really, really liked this game.
One thing to mention is there are breeding spots. So when you pass over a breeding location, if you have a pair of animals in an enclosure, they will create another animal of that type. Up to 2 enclosures per animal type. So that adds a lot more strategy to the game, which I love, because if you can get to where you have the breeding pairs in 2 different enclosures, all of a sudden, anytime anybody passes over one of those enclosures, you're getting 2 animals for free. This is a game that my girls will pull out and just play on their own.
They taught me and my wife how to play. It was a lot of fun.
Andy, you had actually borrowed my copy, and I was at your house. We were getting close to the end of the night, so I was like, oh, hey, let's play New York Zoo. And I was playing with Amara, your daughter. Kind of funny. I started to get the game out. She knows how to play the game, so she was super excited. So she, pulls the game almost out of my hands and was like, no, let me explain to you. Because she knew how to play the game. She was excited about it.
She was excited.
It was great. She did a good job, and we enjoyed the gameplay. It was funny. It was, well, I know how to play the game too. It's my game. But no, she was very excited to teach us how to play. But New York Zoo, a fabulous, fabulous game.
One game I really enjoyed was Great Western Trail. You're a cattle boss. You're trying to gather up all your cows and wrangle them off to the market. It's got trains in it too, and cowboys has got to buy your cattle, and you got put land tiles that help you gain other ability as you play along through the trail. You can do things to make your opponents pay you rent for passing on your tiles, or you can bypass them and not take that trail and pay the bank instead. There's lots of fun little things to help your opponents or not help them. I really enjoy that game. It's a lot of fun. I've only played it maybe 5 times, I think, and not very much. But
It is a great one.
Honestly, 5 plays is a lot.
is it?
Yeah,
It's all been
for
right
us.
there. It's all been right here.
Yeah.
I say especially for that one because it's a long game.
Yeah, it is.
I think this is a fantastic one too. Like you mentioned, right, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different things you can do. You can focus on building buildings, which is what I tend to do.
That's what I tend to do.
Andy, I know with our first or second play, I can't remember which, you focused on buying a ton of cows and you creamed us.
I love putting things on trees and gaining the money for that.
Yeah.
And I love making people pay me rent if I place it in the right place.
Right. Yeah.
It's all about that
that's-
strategic
It's
placing.
like, it's like playing with me.
That's my thing.
One thing about which I wasn't sure about this when you first pulled it out, Nathan, because it's very linear. And I don't typically like linear games, but the amount of strategy they have added or have in this game with it being just a linear, you're
Right.
moving your pawn along this track. Yeah, it branches off in spots, but it's a linear game.
Very
But
much.
there's a lot of strategy and there's a lot going on.
When you sell the market, you have to decide where you're going to sell, which city, move that along, and then which of those bonus tiles you're going to pick up.
Well, and you have to be careful which city,
Yeah.
because if you're selling to the cities that are a little closer to Kansas City, if you sell 2 next to each other, you could actually get a penalty instead of a
Right.
bonus.
Yeah.
Whereas the cities that are trying to get to San Francisco, which is
Yeah.
the furthest one away,
Nathan will always take the first one where you get
Kansas
minus
City.
Kansas
points.
City, yeah.
I never do that.
In fact, there was an episode we talked about that, mentioned that specifically, that we played several games. In all these games, you never shipped to Kansas City because you didn't want those -6 points.
Yeah. That's a
But
lot of points.
It is. The game
But
that I probably won
I
the
don't
most.
win.
Yeah.
So,
The game I won the most at, I
Yeah.
had gone to Kansas City
Yeah.
3 times.
I've never won. So
Yeah.
With most games where you can get negative points and stuff like that, especially early game, I always go for that. In this game, I almost always will take at least 2 trips to Kansas City.
you got to have the
sometimes 3.
money. And if you don't have the money, you can't play.
Totally. And back to Agricola. Back when I was good at the game, I almost always took begging cards early in the game. I chose not to feed my people so that I could do a couple of things, build my engine earlier, essentially.
Keep them motivated with an empty stomach.
Right.
Tighten that belt.
I think negative points early on is worth the trade.
And it's tough, right? -6 points, that's
Yeah.
really a tough pill to swallow.
And you got to get rid of those 0 cows.
And that's the other thing I focus on is shedding all those starting cards.
Makes your train go back.
You've gotten to where you do that very efficiently.
I
don't
spend
like
most
the
of my
backwards.
time in like the first 3
So-
spots of that train, and then you end up having to pay more to ship further. So if you ever ship to San Francisco, it costs me like an extra 10,
But you got the cows to do it.
but you get the cows. It allows me to put the disc there, and every time you put a disc
Yeah.
on San Francisco, I believe it's the 6 points if I recall, you get those positive points, and the positive points start to outweigh those negative points, which makes it worthwhile. Gaining that capital at the first is huge in my book.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a gem.
It was one that was gifted to me, and as soon as we played it, I was like, man, we should have bought this game a lot sooner.
Yeah, that was actually my thought. And I started with the same thing as you, Andy. I looked at the board and everything, and I was like, right? Like, it was linear and all that. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this a whole lot, right? It looked a little cheesy almost. And then we played it, and I was like, that was really cool.
Yeah.
It was a really cool game.
I like your edition. It's got the little guys are molded out of clay.
Mhm.
Whoever did those were really good.
Yeah.
One of them reminds me of Wild Bill Cody, and they're really fun.
Fennel just informed me that he bought a game and all of its expansions, the collector's edition of Everdell. I haven't played it a ton, I think 4 or 5 plays, but I have loved every one of them. Even the first one, in which Andy Poops destroyed me, I could just tell with the mechanics of the game that it was a game that I was going to really enjoy learning and really enjoy figuring out and trying to master. A very, very good game. Each player is given at the beginning of the game a couple of cards that determine what type of animal kingdom you are going to be running. Each of them have asymmetrical power, worker placement, tableau building. You're going to be collecting and building buildings, critters. I guess constructions and critters are what they're called in game. Few resources. There's berries, there's twigs, there's pebbles, and there's resin. Pretty simple game, however. We were doing some things wrong with our first few plays. I was really glad when Andy got this game. It is one that I see myself wanting to play for a long time.
So we initially had been playing this incorrectly. There's a section of the rules that are fairly ambiguous. And Patty Angelique messaged us and was asking us about it, and she corrected us on one of the rules. When you get finished placing workers for the season, so you play in seasons of the year, when you get finished placing workers and you can't play any other cards, you run out of resources or choose to save your resources and you pass, you're going to move into the next season. We were waiting for everyone to move into the next season together, whereas you can actually be in summer when someone else is still in spring. So the game just keeps moving for everyone. When you decide to pass and move on into the next season, you pull all your workers off the board, which makes those spaces available again. But on your next turn, you can start placing them again. And one other thing is when you finish playing the game, so in the fall, when you've decided to pass, your workers stay on the board. So it locks those for the rest of the game. There's a benefit to being speedy, but there's also definitely a benefit to trying to prolong your seasons because you can get more done, you can get more points, get more cards down. I think it adds a layer of strategy to it, which I like. Thanks, Patty, for helping us correct that.
Way to go, Patty.
Going back,
absolutely.
I'm like reading it over and over again when she questioned us on it, and I'm like, my gosh, that is so not clear. She was correct. We needed to move directly into the next season instead of...
It's interesting. Logan, I remember his first play. He sat around for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
After he had ended his first season, and you and I kept going. And then I think the second season, he was also done very early on. I can see it be a two-edged sword, though. Yeah, you get to keep going, but as long as we're going, all those spaces that we have played on are still not available. And that might be the thing that he wants to do.
Yeah, that's true.
I could see that hurting like crazy in that game.
I think this is a game you have to play at least twice. You got to get a feel for it because it plays a little differently. Kind of tricky to get resources and figure out, okay, I need to do this to get resources. You've got to get those resource buildings and critters out. Get those out, that gives you more resources, lets you prolong that season so you can keep purchasing building instructions or gaining critters into your tableau.
Anyway, if you haven't tried Everdell, give it a try. Definitely well worth it. Play it a few times before you really make judgment on it.
So before we go too far, I want to talk about a couple of pig games.
Pig games are good.
Pig games are good. Andy introduced me to Pass the Pigs, which is a simple little game that has been a hit. Most of us here went to a comedy show together. I played with Sierra, your daughter, and I got her name right first try.
Nice. Hold on.
Yes. Slow clap, yeah.
Now I just need him to get my name right.
Yeah. I got your name right. I just got Adam's name wrong that time. But Pass the Pigs, you have two little miniature pigs. You're throwing them down, and depending on how they land, you're going to score points. There's two versions out there. Actually, there's three versions out there. And we're yet to try the third version. Maybe we just need to pause the podcast right now and just play this.
I haven't played. I'd like to play it.
I think you would like it, James. I think you would like it a lot. There's the basic edition, this Pass the Pigs, and then there's Pass the Pigs Party Edition. It changes up the rules. It changes up the way you score the points a little bit. But there's also a big pig. These pigs are not quite the size of a football. These are larger pigs, and so you throw them down, and it's tougher to get the jowlers.
Oh, big time, because they are foam pigs instead of plastic pigs, so they bounce a little more. It's definitely harder to get some of those positions that the pigs land in that give you more points.
Andy, you talk about taking this on date night. You talk about on your first date with your wife. Your wife pulled Pass the Pigs on your first date, which, in my opinion, is probably a keeper, which is probably what you were thinking. Pass the Pigs, super simple but fun game. The Big Pigs, we haven't had a chance to play it yet. We've done the Throw Burrito Extreme at some of our barbecues, which has been a riot.
Pretty extreme.
Pretty extreme, yeah.
Especially with 6-year-olds.
Pass the Pigs and Big Pigs, I would suggest. Fairly cheap games, but a lot of fun.
Of the three, my favorite is the original.
I think so, too.
Pass the Pigs. The other ones are great. I think that by far, just the difference in gameplay, I think is the original superior to the other ones, but they're all good.
So what's another pig game?
We've talked about this before.
One of my favorite stories.
And it still happens. Not as often as it did, but it happens at least once a month at game night on Fridays. We'll be sitting around the game topper playing a strategic game. Everybody's really into it, and my son, who's special needs, will come up and flop this big pig on the table and say, "Who's going to play Pop the Pig with me?" So I'm usually multitasking, playing Pop the Pig with my boy, And he's just laughing and laughing because he beats me almost every time. Or getting mad at me when I beat him. And trying to play whatever game I'm playing with everybody else at the same time. Simple game, and he loves it. So you roll a die, and you have all these different hamburgers on the table. And you roll a die, and the die has a color on it. Or it has a wild symbol, or it has an X. If it has an X, you don't feed the pig. Otherwise, you're going to feed the pig a hamburger matching the color of the die roll. Or if it's the wild, you get to pick what color. There's 4 of each color, and each color has a number on the underside that you don't get to look at until you pick it. It's going to be numbered 1 through 4. You look at the number when you pick the hamburger, and you compress the head of the pig that many times.
So that's meaning he's eating that much hamburger.
It means he's eating that much hamburger. Every time you compress the head of the pig, it's blowing up his belly more. You want to be the one that pops the pig. As you're feeding the pig, I pulled the 4, I'm going to press it 4 times, nothing happens. You keep going until someone pops the pig. Simple game. For him, he makes the game an amazing game. Just because of his reactions to it. Makes it so much fun playing that game with him. It's one that he can understand, one that he loves to play. He gets everybody at the table laughing just because he's so funny with it.
Yeah, I feel bad. The only game he's played with me is Guess Who? I need to get up my street cred with Carson so that I can play Pop the Pig.
For those of you that like sheep games, which there aren't many sheep games out there, I picked up years ago just a unique enough game that I had to get it. It's called Sheer Panic, and it has these molded clay sheep. They're just cute little sheep. They almost look like sheep from Wallace and Gromit. 9 sheep, 4 different colors, 2 of each color, and then there's a black sheep. You have a sheep token on the scoreboard, and that scoreboard is also separated into 4 different corrals, basically herding the sheep through the corrals, and depending on which corral you're in, that will determine how you score points. Each player has an individual player board. It's a 4x3 grid, and each of those spaces on the grid is a separate action that you can take. Once you take that action, it's no longer available for the rest of the game. And each action will have a number associated with it that will determine how many spaces the sheep token on the scoreboard will move. Whether it moves onto a scoring space, which corral it ends its movement in. And you're going to score points. For example, in the very first corral, you want to score points for your sheep being as close to each other as possible. So your color being as close as possible. If I'm blue and my sheep are orthogonally adjacent to each other, I'm going to score 2 points. If they're diagonally adjacent, I'm going to score 1 point. As long as that sheep token is in that first corral, everyone's going to score points that way. The next corral is Roger Ram's corral. Put out a little mini of Roger Ram. He's holding a little flower, and all the sheep love Roger Ram. All the ewes love Roger Ram, so they want to be as close to Roger Ram as possible. In Roger Ram's corral, there are 2 scoring locations. You have to stop the sheep token. When it either land on or pass, it has to stop there. And everybody's going to score points depending on where their sheep are in relationship to Roger Ram. So whoever's closer is going to score more points, and then the rows further and further away, you score fewer and fewer points until you score 0 points. The third corral is the corral with the black sheep, and you want to be as close to the black sheep as possible in this. So you want to be as close to everything in the first 3 corrals. The last corral is the shear corral, and that's where the sheep are going to get sheared, and they don't want to be near the shearer. Whenever there's a scoring space on the last corral, the entire row that's closest to the sheep shearer is removed from the game. Scores no points. And then everybody else scores points, starting with whoever's the furthest, and so on. Silly game. Played this at Hug a MeepleCon, James, back in
That was my
back
first
in spring.
time was with your daughters again, yeah. And I really enjoyed that one because things can change very quickly when you don't think you're doing very well, and then the next move, you can rearrange everything to score for you or not score for somebody else. That makes you better too.
And it's interesting, the actions you can take, you can do the U-turn, which will rotate all the sheep 90 degrees. Which can completely change where your sheep are. You can play the fence action. Choose one of the sides and basically create an imaginary fence, and all the sheep will get pushed up against that fence, which reformulates the rows. A lamb slam, which just your sheep shoves another sheep out of the way.
A lamb slam?
It's called a lamb slam.
I like it.
Quite a few actions that you can do to manipulate where the sheep are. It's a fun little game. Not too terribly long. It plays in about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the number of players.
I like the short games.
It's enjoyable. It's just silly. Components are cool looking.
I haven't played it in a long time, but I thought it was cute. Not my favorite, because it's not my favorite style of game. But I liked that they did include a bunch of strategic things that you could do that made it more enjoyable for me.
So another simple game, we actually owe a lot of this thanks to you, James, is Lupin Louie. And James, you found a 3D model that would allow us to take this up to 8 players. instead of base 4 players. I've had a blast with this game. When
Brent introduced me to that one.
Brent bought it. The 2 copies I own are all thanks to Brent. It's a game that we put on the table the first time, and everybody's like, what is this? This is dumb. And then 3 hours later...
You can't pull you away.
Yeah, it was...
Well done, one more game.
Yeah, one more game. We had a similar experience at SaltCon, where we were playing this with 8 players. We did a tournament. James even printed us up some trophies. So we had some little chicken trophies. We had a chicken medallion that was the shape of one of the chicken coins, but much bigger. Great experience. We played it several times. We got some seasoned players that just sat down like, what is this? Similar experience. This is great. Why haven't I played this before? Lupin Louie was an instant hit for a game that shouldn't have been, right?
That's the thing that I love about this game. It's an instant hit, generally for everybody. And no matter the age. Briggs, at age 5, was loving this game. All of us at age 40 we're also loving this game. Very fun game.
A game that has just barely come out that I really want to play is Dinosaur World. It looks like an awful lot of fun.
Doug has already played his copy. My copy is in shrink still. Dinosaur World, which is similar to Dinosaur Island, the roaring, right? I don't know why I always get excited to say roaring, but I do. Love the title. I'm excited to get those to the table too.
Unfortunately, our time to talk about animal games has come to an end.
It's time to close the zoo.
But there are so many more games that we just haven't been able to chat about. Like to mention, we actually had a big hit with Camel Up at SaltCon end of summer. Several of the ladies from Hug played it, and they had only ever played the older edition, and the new edition had a bunch of improvements. They were all very much in awe of the new edition, so if you've played Camel Up and you loved the older edition, you might want to check out the new one. You just mentioned a lot of the dinosaur-themed games. Those are great.
Tiny Epic Dinosaurs. Sewer Pirates is another fun game.
Another oldie that I have loved is Coloretto.
One of my favorites. That's a family favorite, and always had game parties too.
Very easy one, and that's another one that you could do on a date night. Small box game.
Reef is another real easy one too. Very simple, very fun. My wife likes that one. Bunny Kingdom we didn't get to talk about. Root was a great game. Talking about asymmetrical powers, whole asymmetrical game.
The whole game is asymmetrical.
An Oath is a similar style, which we still haven't opened up yet. There's still time at the end of the year, right?
Ecos was great. That's one that we definitely need to play some more.
We have the expansion for it. We haven't played with the expansion yet. We complain about this every episode. Too many games, not enough time.
Yeah.
Still in the wrap.
No, it's out of the wrap. It's in the box.
Speaking of wrap, we're going to have to make that a wrap. And until next time,
we'll see you out there trying to catch all those animal games. Gotta catch them all. It's more fun than Pokemon. I don't know. I haven't played Pokemon.
That's true.
It's more fun. Not Pokemon. The animals are more fun.
It would be more fun than Pokemon.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram
under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and we have so much goodness out there.
We also want to thank Braden Detergent for our music.